Good evening, good morning, good day, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel and my series of videos on healing by sharing our stories. And that's what we've got to do. It's simple, you know. And tonight I have this morning for me, tonight for my lovely guest, joyful Jenny Luscombe from the UK. We're going to embark on another sharing of stories. I came across Jenny through my connection with Mark Attwood, who's a squabbling friend of mine. And I'm really looking forward to Jenny sharing her story from her heart. And it's like we are both coming from Heartspace. So, Jenny, please introduce yourself and just go for it. You've got the talking stick, and the table is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks for giving me a voice and a platform. Gosh, so it's hard to know where to start. So I'll start birth to 7, seeing as we were talking about that just now. So birth to 7 is what gives us the template that we then take with us. Obviously, I didn't know that at the time, but I know that now. So I'm a healer. I'm a EFT tapping practitioner, and I do another therapy called the emotion code, which is I use a form of muscle testing to identify trapped emotion that the people have about their specific issue that they come with. And then I'm able to help them release that and identify it, enable them to ask questions about its origin, and then talk about kind of how that's affected them. And I'm also right now training to be a quantum healer. So that's my new thing. So I've been running my business for about 7 years now. I'm just in the process of, I've just finished writing a course as well to help and inspire people to do the inner work themselves, because along my journey, I realized that I was quite a traumatized human, and for the majority of my adult life, I didn't know that, and I was in denial, and then in denial of the denial once I knew that the denial was there. But anyway, so sort of rewinding all the way back to the beginning, I started to surface a lot of memories when I was in my 30s that I didn't understand at first. And it was kind of like, it was an odd experience. It was kind of like my head opened, and I had, some people would call that spiritual awakening or a nervous breakdown, whatever the label is. It wasn't very nice. And I suddenly had access to a boatload of memories that I hadn't previously known were there. And it was like a flood, like the floodgates opened. And I didn't really know how to handle that. And I ended up going to see a counsellor. And I did a few sessions with her and talked a few things through. And I'd seen on her profile that she had EFT. And I asked her about it. I said, what does that stand for? What does that mean? And she said, well, it stands for emotional freedom techniques. And she'd only just started to learn how to do this, and she didn't feel confident enough to do it with me because she was still training. But she said, well, Jenny, you can read books and you can watch videos on YouTube for free, and then you can unwind your own trauma yourself, because she took a look at me and saw that I had quite chronic issues. Quite a complex case. And I thought, well, and I've got a background in psychology, and I thought, well, how does a person do that themselves? So I was really intrigued, and I followed it up, and then it proceeded to change my entire life. And then I realized what happened birth to 7, and going into teenage and then adulthood. So I've written a course which can help people do that. And so I kind of like, this is based on 10 years worth of research, so that people don't have to spend 10 years like figuring it all out. But I've noticed sort of on forums and things, there's a lot of people saying, well, what's shadow work, and how do I do the inner work, and what does that mean? And so I've put together a course kind of very raw. There's me kind of tapping and crying and talking to myself, and showing people the process. And once you've sort of memorized these are the steps that you go through, and then you're tapping the whole time. And then I take people into inner child work and parts work and all of that sort of thing. Then you can unwind your own trauma. And as soon as I started to use these techniques back in my 30s, I started to have the most profound shifts of consciousness. I couldn't believe it. And I was working in education at the time as a teacher. And I previously, before that, worked in mental health services in a psychiatric hospital. And I just thought, well, how on earth, like, is this not in schools? And how is this not in hospitals? And I now know that it's been suppressed. And it's been suppressed because it works. So I've decided to just, like you, I'm on a mission, and I wanted to get this out into the world so that people stop popping the pills that don't work. But basically, the pharmaceutical companies don't like it because people would become empowered and then not need to pay all that, they wouldn't get all their money for all their pills and all of that. So anyway.
So thanks for your beautiful summary of where you are now and what you are doing. What I would like you to do now is just take a deep breath and like revisit your childhood and share with us the feelings that you've attached to your childhood and any lessons that you learned from childhood. Like for me, just from my own example, I had a pretty violent childhood, but I thought it was normal because that's what kids do, but the lessons I learned from my childhood was mum is always beating me, therefore she does not love me, therefore I'm unlovable and it's all my fault. That was the first lesson. The second lesson was the world's a dangerous place because I'm always getting beaten. And then the lesson I got from Dad was Dad never spends any time with me, therefore he does not love me, therefore I'm unlovable and it's all my fault. So those were the lessons that I learned from my childhood.
Yeah, so what you're describing are, like the limiting beliefs that we end up with, that we end up sort of looking at life through these filters, and it kind of alters your perception of, well, I mean, it doesn't alter your perception, it gives you your perception of life. So as well as kind of like all of that emotion, there's all those beliefs as well, I realized. So I mean, my upbringing, I was raised in a Catholic home, and my mum was like quite devout Catholic. I mean, we had to go to church every Sunday. And I feel like I was a connected child. Like I did believe in God and I had some kind of spiritual belief. But, looking around at everyone in church, it was just like always so dark and kind of solemn, and it wasn't nice. There wasn't a good vibe, like when you look at some other ways that people worship, kind of like there's joy in a lot of other religions, but I mean I've come to sort of feel like all religions are just giving you someone else's beliefs and it's not yours. And so I'm now kind of like I need to go in my own direction, thanks.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's like look at the Druids and dancing around the maypole,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for me, religion's a headspace, spirituality is Heartspace. Religions are all about control, for me anyway, and they always want money.
Yeah. No, they did pass the plate round every Sunday, and
Yeah.
it was just a weird vibe, and like nothing made sense to me. And it wasn't just that. Like I was this child in this family. I've had two other sisters, one older, one younger. It felt like from really young that I wasn't related to them. Like I was different somehow. And I didn't know how I was different or what was going on for me, but I felt quite lonely, even though I was surrounded by people. So I mean, there was a lot of abuse, and like the Catholic religion is, you know, quite famous for its abusiveness. Um, I mean, there was physical abuse, but that wasn't kind of the main thing. Like the emotional abuse was the main thing. And the really sinister and dark thing about emotional abuse, I think, and emotional neglect particularly, is that it's unseen. So what I realized when I started tapping, like all of the stuff that I really struggled with, it wasn't so much what did happen, it's what didn't happen. So it was the absence of care and the absence of love and the absence of physical touch and like the hugs and the absence of encouragement and the absence of connection. I mean, I still don't know who my mum is now to this day. I've got no idea what her story is. And like, I'm really drawn to you, Bob, because you've got this emphasis on people telling their stories and the healing effects that that brings. And at some point, maybe I will ask my mum what her story is, but I'm not convinced that she will tell me because she's very closed and we're actually estranged now. But yeah, like I remember saying to my EFT trainer, like, how do you tap about the absence of something? You know, the absence of literally all the things that you needed. So it's kind of like when you come out the other side of emotional neglect and emotional abuse, it's kind of like you've got this thirst and this kind of starvation for something, but you don't know what for. So I think that's why it took me so long to unwind like everything that was going on for me, because in adulthood, my childhood has led me to, you know, postnatal depression and anxiety disorder and complex PTSD symptoms and even chronic pain, you know, none of which I have now. Um, but I always had this, like, when I think of about my inner child, I just think of this kind of desolate child that I was just longing. I was just like longing for something. And it's that kind of like I there's so many needs not met
Yeah.
that I didn't know what that was about really.
Can I
Um,
respond, Jenny?
yeah, of course.
Yeah. Um, I cannot imagine any child in any family in Western society that's had all their emotional developmental needs met. For me, my primary abusers were my mum and my dad. But there's a societal element too that's entirely intentional. And I think the biggest abuse of any child is abandonment.
Mm,
And every child, again, in so-called civilized society, has suffered that wound simply because, and if we go back to like feudal times, a child was born, mum and dad looked after the child, but there were brothers and cousins and sisters and aunts. And when mum and dad went out to the field, they took the baby with them. So there's this constant connection. And at times when that was not possible for the parents to maintain that physical connection, then the child was parented by its immediate family and the whole village. And now through the society that we're blindly supporting, a child gets whisked off to school at 3.5, 4 years old, because the parents both have to work hard to to pay back the debt that they've accrued in their life, you know. So for me, one
yeah.
of the biggest wounds is that abandonment. And
Mm,
from my own journey, mum was not emotionally present. She just said things like, oh, you know, she was always blaming me for the scar on her belly because I was cesarean. Well, that's thanks, mum. You know, that's really uplifting. And another one of
yeah.
her favourites was, if it wasn't for you, I could be out having fun. You know, like,
Mm,
geez.
mm,
But what I learned, my modus operandi as a child was, I was living in a state of constant fear. So I was living totally in fight or flight. And that subconsciously became my MO as an adult, you know. I had
Yeah.
this facade, and every wound, and I thank John Bradshaw for his work on the inner child. Every time I went back to my childhood, I could recall another moment of terror, another moment of terror, another, and really connected with those feelings, but didn't know what to do with them
Yeah.
until what I understand now is my explanation of it. All those wounds became a body memory, like a lead weight on the soul, and now that's why I totally trust my body, because my body always does what it needs, and I can quite confidently say there is no such thing as mental illness. For me, all the behaviors that are the DSM that psychiatrists use is just listing loads of fictitious illnesses, but they're all based on behaviors. There's no science behind it. For me, all of those behaviors are just the body's way of trying to get to the person. Like my panic attack was in July 1984. Bang, I was super confident. I was living the magazine life, ticking all the boxes. And then my heart, my inner knowing, the very essence of me just went slap. And so those behaviors that I experienced was just my inner knowing telling me, Bob, you got to wake up. You got to stop living your programming. You got to find the truth and live it. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so much of that resonates with me, what you just said. I mean, like a lot of what I do now is getting people to focus on their body, and you can make connections with what's going on for you. Like, for example, if someone's got constipation, even something as simple as that, it's like your body's not letting go. So there's a clue. There's something about not letting go. And like I find the body like very literal, but obviously like none of us have been taught this stuff that is just so natural, and it kind of comes naturally now. Once you know, don't you? But that like all of those kind of like stories that you tell yourself, like I had so many, and I still surface them every day. I think like the most common one is I'm just not good enough. And like I heard that so many times that I wasn't good enough. And my mum would say things to me like, Jennifer's got nothing interesting to say, you need to shut up, and kind of, she needs to be knocked down a peg or two, because it's kind of like, like she saw that she was doing something virtuous or good if she was knocking you down, like you need to be taught a lesson. But it's kind of like, we need the opposite of that. We need to be built up, and like children need opportunities to fly and like, show off, but you just hear parents say to their kids all the time, stop being silly or stop showing off. I mean, like we had our joy crushed, our positive side, as well as like maybe negative behaviors as well. So like we've got a boatload of stuff going on. But yeah, I mean, I felt fear the whole time, and she was very unpredictable, and it kind of gives you like people become quite obsessive. I, I didn't become obsessive compulsive as in like I needed to wash my hands all the time, or some people get those kind of behaviors, but I became an obsessive thinker. And you were talking about the thinking before, like trying to think your way out of everything. I was constantly searching and just searching, like, what the hell is going on? Like, why am I so sad? And why is everything so bleak? And I just couldn't understand it. And like when I sort of got old enough to go to other kids' houses to play, and like their parents were like really different to mine, I was like, oh my God, everyone's laughing. And it's not until you're sort of outside your perspective and then you see your own, it's kind of like, wow, like what's going on in my family? And I just sort of from quite an early age, was on this like quest to just unwind everything and like figure everything out. But I think I took it, and probably still do to some degree, like took the thinking to like ridiculous proportions. And I now know that it's all about listening to your body, listening to like what is going on here and what is the story that I'm telling myself, you know. So I did find birth to 7 like very difficult, and kind of, you know, beyond that as well, going into sort of teenage years, like I think it can go two ways. Like you can either submit and just become powerless and just choose to do as you're told. You know, do as you're told is like, I think, one of the worst things a parent can say. Because if you fast forward that to like right now, like if you do as you're told now by governments and all of that, it's like, you know, you're up shit creek without a paddle. So if you download that imprint, it's like, oh. But things as simple as that, you know, and like there's probably people watching this now going, oh my God, I say that to my kids. But like everybody does, because we had it said to us, and then our grandparents said it to them. And you know, like we're the paradigm breakers, and we're the ones who are gonna be like, this ends here, because like the emotional dark age is over, and it's time to like understand now, you know.
Well,
Um
what I see happening is wounded healers, thanks to the birth of global consciousness, which is what the Mayans called the internet. Wounded healers, people with lived experience, are getting out there. They found their truth and they're sharing it, and they're sharing it through their story. Now, for me, I drive my life under 2 simple principles. The first one is the KISS principle, keep it simple, sovereign. And I changed it because I know that the words I consciously choose to use create my reality. So my words are my spells. So I now cast my own spells, not the spelling I was taught in school. And then the second principle is something I coined about 15 years ago, and that's the SUE principle, and the SUE, and that just stands for all are sovereign, unique, and equal, and everything else flows from that. So, you know, everybody's on their own hero's journey, and I can't wake anybody up. That's their job. But I found that simply by listening to the stories of other people, it gives me a little awakening. I never considered that before. I know, you know, so we're all sort of not feeding off each other, but what is our purpose as a human being? You know, why are we here? And again, the answer is simple. We are simply here to lift each other. And that's what I love about being part of this community, because that's what we're doing. And it's not complicated. It cannot be legislated. You know, governments are trying to impose all these mental health programs. Well, they got no bloody idea, you know, and they're on a different agenda anyway, because they like big pharma, and that whole mess. They want customers, not cures. But people, for me, people with lived experience sharing their story, that's the cure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So can you recall specific moments of terror in your childhood, or?
Yeah, there was a lot of she was quite frightening. She was quite a scary mum. The 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 thing, it wasn't so much, yeah, I was terrified of her, but the predominant emotion that I felt was confusion, because there was a lot of gaslighting, and confusion is obviously a symptom of gaslighting. And sort of fast forward like into sort of teenage years, like when I went to secondary school, my mum was my teacher. So she was a teacher at my secondary school. So she had this outdoors face, you know, when she was outside the house. She was this pillar of society. You know, she's so fair. Everyone was like, she's so fair. She's such a good teacher and all of this. And then back home, sort of behind closed doors, it was a completely different story. And, you know, I call it head fuckery. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on YouTube. But like the confusion and the like, you know, this is just learning that you're not the same person everywhere you go. Like, you know, my quest now is for like total authenticity. And like my biggest trigger is games of pretend. I cannot stand games of pretend.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's just cut straight to the like deep personal conversation, because I can't do small talk. I can't do any bullshit. It's just
Yeah.
like, no, I can't.
Well, this is a bullshit-free zone, darling. So
Thank God for that. But yeah, you know, she was terrifying, and I think she still is. But like I said before, it could have gone that way or that way. I could have submitted and just gone along with what she wanted and been the person she wanted me to be, because she was trying to mold me into somebody that I wasn't. Or I could have rebelled. So I chose rebellion as a teenager. One of my other sisters, she chose to submit, and she's now very, very ill physically, and she's got like an acquired immune deficiency. No, sorry, not acquired, because that's AIDS. She's got like an immune deficiency disorder where she has to have a blood transfusion every 3 weeks. So basically, her blood cells can't support her immune system, and she's got like a lung condition. And sort of when I think of her with this lung condition, it's kind of like she was suffocated. And I kind of feel like my mum shut down every aspect of her personality. And that's what I'm coming out of, because I rebelled against that and I was not going to have it. And my other sister, like, she's struggling in her life, you know, with emotional and physical stuff. And you know, like, we've all attracted quite narcissistic people in relationships, because obviously, you know, that's another thing. As well as your body showing you, so does your external reality and like all the people in it, which is another lesson. So yeah, I did become not like an overt rebel. Like I was kind of a bit of a quiet rebel. So, you know, I would do the smoking and the drinking kind of before I was old enough. And I'd have to lie about where I was, and because I wasn't allowed to do anything. And then I'd accidentally missed the last train home and stuff, so I could stay out longer. And like, you know, I wanted an identity and I wanted to be happy, and I saw that other people were, and I wanted a piece of that, and so I rebelled. So that just led to us locking horns. And it's funny because, like, kind of later in my life, I was trying to unwind all of this, and I had a session with a psychic healer, and she looked at my energy and she looked at all the energies of my family. And she looked at my mum and she said, Jenny, she said, that's not motherly love. And I said, I know.
hey, hey Jenny,
But she said,
hey Jenny, it's going to drop in about a minute and a half,
oh, okay.
but don't go
All
away.
right.
I'll just restart it
Okay.
when that happens. Yeah, it's a great conversation so far. I'm loving it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Mm. Ah, dear. So what I'll do is I'll end it now and then restart during this pause. So if you need a potty break or anything, you know, go for it.
Yeah. Okay.
Here we go. See you in a minute.
All right then.
Yeah. Yeah, you said something really powerful there, Jenny, about the period of childhood being a total screw up of the mind. I think your word was mindfuckery.
Yeah.
For me, in my journey, and this is about, I had my panic attack in 84, and this realization came through in about 92 when I was doing John Bradshaw's work on the inner child. Now, I was, and this is a feeling, God, I hate you, Mum. You're always beating me. Why did you always beat me? I hate you. I hate you. But you got to love your mum. You've only got one mum. And it was that dichotomy that was tearing my soul apart. And so, so I sat down and wrote a letter to Mum. Dear Mum. And I thought this was going to be a couple of pages, but it ended up being like War and Peace. It was as thick as the bloody Bible by the time I finished. But I just said, Dear Mum, I'm just writing to tell you how I felt as a child growing up in our family. I hated it when you beat me with the frying pan. I hated it when you dangled me by the wrist and beat me with the carpet sweeper. And, just every recollection I just got out and put it on paper. And when I came to the end of it, I just said, reiterated, Mum, this is not about blame. I'm just sharing my story. Please tell me your story, your loving son, Bobby. And then the hardest thing I did was actually, I posted that letter to her. She's in the UK, I'm in Australia. And that's probably one of the hardest things I ever did, was posting that letter to Mum. She wrote back, oh, Bobby, you must think I'm the worst mother in the whole world, but I'm only doing my very best. God. So I wrote back, Mum, this is not about blame. Please, please, please tell me your story. So eventually, probably about 6 months later, she wrote back, and I got to hear her story. She was born in Germany in 1924, between the wars. Her dad was an alcoholic, her mum was a control freak. Her cousins were in the SS, so they were shot. And then the light bulb went off, and I realised that Mum had a shit childhood too. And yes, Mum was doing her very, very best. But all that she could do was dump on me what got dumped on her.
Mm.
So by hearing Mum's story, I could move from that place of hate through understanding back to love, yes, and forgiveness. And my healing wasn't complete until I was able to forgive my abuser. And so a few days after I received a letter, I found her in the UK. She's back in hospital with a second incidence of bowel cancer, 20 years apart, because she never changed anything. But that's the first time we spoke as mother and son, two adults. And tears were streaming, both sides of the pond. And 3 days later, she died. And I thought, what a beautiful closure.
Yeah. What an
But hang
amazing.
on, there's this niggle in my shoulder. What's this niggle? What's this bloody niggle in my shoulder? Right, Dad, you bastard. So I got out the notepad and wrote a similar to Dad, but because he never spent any time with me. He'd already died. I didn't know where or when, but so I wrote the story, put it in an envelope, signed it to Dad in heaven, and burned it. And for me, in that way, I broke the multi-generational cycle of abuse. Now, there is an amazing caveat to Mum's story. About 5 years, 6 years after, I contacted Mum through a spiritual medium who shared stuff with me that only Mum and I could know. So I knew she was fair dinkum. And the message I got from Mum was, Bobby, thank you so much for writing that letter, because I'm now doing the same work with my parents in the beyond. And Jenny, that blew me away. That blew me away.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Mm.
But, like, we've got no idea what the ripple effect is, like here on Earth, but like elsewhere,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
And that's why healing is so profound, because it affects our families and our circle and like everybody around us.
yeah,
It's phenomenal.
yeah,
But what an amazing experience to have, before she left.
yeah, yeah. It was. Oh, and it's like when I talk about this, the lead weights in the soul. After that conversation with Mum on the phone, it was like somebody had taken an elephant off my shoulders. That's how it
Yeah.
felt. I felt that, spiritually lightened, lightened or enlightened. I don't know. Probably
Yeah.
a bit of
I
both.
mean, if you think about it, like we've got trillions of cells in our body, and it's our cells that are holding all of that stuff. So when you suddenly process and release that, you're going to feel lighter. aren't
Yeah.
you? Like,
Yeah.
it has such a profound effect. I mean, like, what you were saying there about the dichotomy and the cognitive dissonance and the confusion and the head fuckery. I mean, like the way that that affects adulthood and the childhood when you're there, like you can't trust yourself because you're in this constant state of receiving information about yourself that is not real. It's twisted because it's coming through their experience that was unhealed, um and like my dad as well, like I've not even mentioned him yet, but that's kind of like quite significant because he did play a role in my life, and he was much kinder than her, and he didn't play a part in the abuse, but he did enable it by being almost like one of the other kids in a way, because I'm not saying that he was weak, but and he would stand up for us sometimes, but really something terrible would happen, like she'd humiliate one of us publicly or hit us or something, freak out about something and be volatile, throw things, or be aggressive. And then he would just sort of in the next 10 minutes act as if nothing had happened, which just added to the head fuckery.
Yeah.
And then obviously you imprint, men are like this, like men don't support you. So then you attract men who don't support you.
Or
And
or you become lesbian.
yeah.
No, no, all joking apart, all joking apart from the work I've done in the many groups that I've been involved in since the 90s, for me there is a strong correlation between like a young girl and a baby, a child, a female child, if it doesn't feel safe with a significant male in its environment, well, that kind of sets it up for adult life. I
Yeah.
can't trust men, so I can only fall in love with, I can only have a relationship with women. And the same
Yeah.
goes for boys,
Mm,
whoever
yeah.
was, whatever gender, whatever sex your primary abuser was, that's the last gender that you're going to seek an, and a relationship in, and I won't call it adulthood, but what's supposed to be adulthood.
Yeah.
And so for me, it goes back to the KISS principle: keep it simple, sovereign. God
Mm,
created Adam and Eve. End of story. Full stop. Period.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And what you're saying there is like quite significant now, because a lot of men were shut down by feminist mums, and like they got the message that the patriarchy is the root of all evil, which it is. But it's almost like little boys have all of that on their shoulders, and then they suppress all their masculine aspects, which actually women are looking for. And men don't know what women want, and like it's caused so many problems with gender, and it's an absolute minefield, like the whole thing. um
That's a
but
lovely
yeah,
word you used. It's an absolute mind field.
it is a minefield.
I love it.
It totally is. It really is. But there's so much unwinding to do. There really is. I mean, something powerful that all of this gave me, because I don't want to just be on the negative side of it, because however abusive your parents are, there's always gifts that come as a result of everything that happened, and that's like one of the most powerful aspects of healing, is kind of like taking that pearl of wisdom that you learned. But I mean, the whole experience, the emotional abuse and the absence of love and the absence of care and all of that, like it's kind of um given me like a really strong sense of justice, because there was so much injustice, there was so much unfairness, and there was so much anger. Like, a lot of my unwinding has been anger and resentment and bitterness and guilt, and like all sorts of different emotions that are kind of quite socially unacceptable, even though no emotions are unacceptable. Obviously, they're all human and the parts of the spectrum, and they're all there to be processed. But yeah, in adulthood, it's given me a really strong sense of justice. And so I sort of, in my life as an adult in different jobs, I became a bit of a whistleblower. And kind of not meaning to, because, like, you know, I'm kind of quite introverted, and I've spent a lot of my adult years quite shy because there was a lot of shame as well, obviously coming from a Catholic background. So to speak out and to stand up for myself and to stand up for other people was actually excruciatingly difficult for me. But the universe wove its web, and I found myself in all sorts of situations where I could see that injustices were happening and I couldn't not say because of my background.
Yeah.
Because I was always standing up for my sisters, and I was the rebel. You know, when time moved on a bit and I grew up, I became the rebel, and it sort of carried on through a bit. So I seem to have, like, attracted jobs and employers where there was some really dodgy stuff going on. And things that I saw through my work experience that were just woke me up and made me see what the world was and what was really going on, sort of like underneath the veil, basically. So there was, like, quite a few significant experiences. Like, one of them was one of my first jobs. I worked in mental health services, and I had studied psychology at university because, like, even before I was on the spiritual path, I was interested in, like, searching. And I was working in a psychiatric hospital, and it was my first job as an adult out in the world. And so I I was in this ward round with a psychiatrist, and I was just so interested in, like, the whole dynamic. Like, the client was there seriously mentally ill, even though mental illness doesn't exist, as we know. And I was kind of like, you know, the social workers there, the psychiatric nurse, like, you know, all the professionals around this person. And I was there because I was supporting this person as well. And I was like, why is the client the last person to speak? Like, shouldn't they be speaking first? And, like, on the locked wards and all of this, I was like, well, don't these people just need love? And it was just this military, like, abusive, cultural, just negative, horrible, like, vile culture. And I was just like, what is going on here? Anyway, so I had a chat to the psychiatrist. I was trying to get to the bottom of this. Like, why is everyone so mean? And, like, why are you acting like this person's done something wrong and that they need to be punished?
Yeah.
So anyway, I caused a bit of a stir, and then the conversation sort of went on, and I said to him, so when you're prescribing, like, antipsychotic medication, antidepressant medication, like, how do you, like, what's the science? Like, how do you decide what you're going to give someone? So you, like, you've got someone with anxiety and depression, and then another person with bipolar, and then another person with schizophrenia. Like, how do you decide what you're going to give them? And he goes, no, Jenny, you've misunderstood. We just give them what's cheap. And so I was like, wow. So not only is everything culturally twisted and warped, and, like, I'm finding it hard to understand, there's no science in what you're giving people.
Right.
And so I realized that the whole pharmaceutical industry was just based on money,
Right.
and that there was no science. And I was like, how is this even possible? So I found this out, like, when I was in my 20s. So I, like, had this profound knowing from, like, quite an early age that it was all bullshit, that it was all some kind of illusion. So I was hooked then. I was like, right, I'm going to figure out what's going on here. So I lasted 3 years working for the NHS, and I was like, there's something really wrong here. So anyway, I retrained and I became a teacher. Actually, before that, I worked a little bit teaching English to asylum seekers in Liverpool, which is where I still live now. And I was working for a private company there. And it was kind of like a scenario where, you know, the clients got an extra tenner a week on the dole, basically, if they learned to improve their English skills.
So Liverpool, that's the capital of Ireland, isn't it?
Yes, it is, apparently. Yeah, there's
Jenny,
loads of Irish.
Jenny, what I would like to interpose now, getting back to your own personal story and development, is what was your rite of passage? When was the time that you decided to take full responsibility for your life?
Yeah.
Now, for me, it was 2005. I just became a ship's captain, and the first time I took a boat out was, bugger Bob, the buck stops with you. You're responsible for the lives and safety of the people on this vessel, even the vibe. All I did at that time was I took that ideology and applied it to my whole life. So yes, I am master and commander of this life that I do create, and I take full responsibility for it. So that was the time that I adopted that, because and then as master, I thought, well, what's my purpose? Well, I'm master, I'll set my purpose. So I set my life purpose to simply find my own truth. And how do I know what is my truth? Whatever resonates with my heart. So I got the big one out of the way, bang.
Mm-hmm.
Then, as a spiritual being having a physical experience, how do I want to experience this life? So at that time, I set my own conscious life intention, which is, I am here to have a gentle, joyful, loving, healthy, and abundant life. Now, that I am here to have is my command to the universe, but it's also my address to the universe. So the universe knows where to deliver what I've commanded. And I'll tell you what, Jenny, since I put that conscious life intention in place, I am just kicking back and letting the universe do all the hard work. But my actual rite of passage was the night that I bet my life on trusting my intuition. So, and that's another story. So when did you take full responsibility for your life? And can you identify your own rite of passage?
I think it was when I became a mum. So it was in becoming a mum that I realized what had happened with my mum. So I feel like my daughter coming into the world was the catalyst for spiritual awakening experience. And that's when my head opened and all the memories came, because I couldn't be the mum that to my daughter that my mum was to me. And there was no way in a million years that that was going to happen. And sort of once I'd had this experience where I was aware of everything and I joined the dots and I'd started tapping and I'd started to find a way that I was surfacing subconscious limiting beliefs and emotion, and there was just so much of it. I fell out with my mum big time, and we were down at my mum's, my mum and dad's, and they live in the south of England. Like, you know, when I went to university and came up to Liverpool, I went to the opposite end of the country, and I didn't want to go to university. I wasn't interested really. I wanted to get away and I wanted to live, you know.
I went
So
to Australia.
yeah, there's
I
a
know
theme
this
developing.
about. Sorry.
So yeah, basically I was down at my mum and dad's at the opposite end of the country with my daughter. She was really little. She was crawling around on the floor. And I stood in the kitchen and I was just taking in the family scene, and it was Sunday and my mum and my dad were cooking like a Sunday dinner. And there was lots of games of pretend, and I was quite triggered. I was like trying to keep a lid on it all and trying to, for the sake of everyone, just keep myself calm. And the kids were there, my sister's kids were there. And then I just witnessed this whole scene where my dad was doing the potatoes and my mum was bullying my dad about the potatoes. And I just thought, this has been going on for decades. We've watched her bully him, and like he has to submit to her because he tries to keep the peace. And I just like have this, all of our relationships are completely fucked up because we've had you as role models, you know. And I just like flipped, and I just went, so like, why are you bullying him? And then everyone in the room sort of turned around and they were like, oh, and like everything, so everyone kind of went in slow motion and they were like, oh my God, Jen's like standing up to mum. And so I was like, no, I was like, what's, just leave him to do the potatoes. I mean, he's an adult. He can cook the potatoes the way he wants. He doesn't have to do what you tell him. And like, why are you bullying him? And anyway, there was just this silence. And she was absolutely flabbergasted that somebody had stood up to her and that everyone was watching and listening. And then basically I kind of left early, and she was kind of in denial. She was like, I'm not bullying him, you know, all of this. And then after that, I kind of left, and I was like, I'm not really interested in Sunday dinner. And after that, there was a period of time where we just were just not talking. And my dad would ring me up and he'd go, come on, Jen, you know, like he'd say things like, we're a close family. And I was kind of like, Dad, you're gaslighting yourself. Like, it's amazing that you could be saying that. Like, have you seen what's been going on for the last like decades? And clearly he was in denial, and I have got a lot of compassion for him. But anyway, basically, I needed to take responsibility for myself. And I tried to talk to her, and she shut down and closed off and made me the bad guy, which is the pattern. And I now see, sort of working with clients, like the member of the family who is the truth speaker, the one that speaks out, the one that tells it how it is the one that will ultimately get pushed sort of outside the family in the end. And that's kind of what's happened, like with us. And it feels unworkable, and it's become irreconcilable. But I mean, as soon as I'd found like an outlet for my emotion, I realized she's not going to talk to me. I can't, I kind of thought for a while, I need her to talk to me. And I was kind of quite forceful and aggressive. And I had to sort of move through that phase. I know it doesn't work now, because the anger is not going to be conducive to, you know, and members of my family said, you need to calm down so that she, you know, she'll talk to you. And I was like, well, why should the victim of the abuse like calm down, you know? But I had to move through that. And now, like, we've still got that stalemate, and it is years later now. So I've taken responsibility for my life and for my daughter by unwinding the whole lot, like all of it. And you know, I know that it's an ongoing journey, and that you can't kind of, you know, you have to commit to this for life. Like, it is almost a thing that never ends, like, because there's always more to release and more to kind of open up and kind of more to come. But as soon as I started to heal and feel relief, I started to get like a much stronger connection to the universe and to God and all of that. And synchronicities started to happen, and then I felt like I was being guided and led in certain directions. And
That's why you're
uh,
here now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And this is not an easy journey. And I mean, some people are all love and light, aren't they? But you have to go dark if you want to get anywhere. You've got to go into the dark. And I mean, my whole life from that point on went upside down, and it still is, like, now still. But you know, obviously the better it gets, the better it gets. But obviously I found myself in a career that I didn't want. I was a teacher for 10 years. I was in a marriage that wasn't working for me. I was with the same person for 24 years, and that relationship was over 5 years ago. And I had to come out of that relationship for my daughter. And lots of people judged me and made me the bad guy again, you know. And it's kind of like, you know, I tried to explain to people, I'm not going to have her going through the same experience as me, where I was surrounded by conflict 24/7. That's not for her. Like, you know, people think that a successful relationship is kind of this like longevity. You know, if you're together forever, then that's the sign of a good relationship. Well, my parents are still together and they hate each other and they argue all the time. That's not success. That's like some kind of like
Sin.
endurance test.
That's, that's, that's a sin
It's a
against
game of
it's
It's a game of pretend.
it's a sin against creation because
Uh,
um, for me, we are supposed to live in a space of love. And
yeah.
talking about personal journey, I lost my belief in me when I was about 4 3/4 years old. But I won't share that story now. It's irrelevant. But I did reclaim my belief in me. So now I reckon I'm still as my journey, my inner soul journey. I'm my mission in that arena is to get to a state where I totally love myself, warts and all. Now I'm not quite there yet because I still have some addictions to overcome, and for me, all addictions are reinforcing the childhood message that I don't deserve to be healthy, I don't deserve to live. So I've still got a couple of addictions that I'm working on. But for me, the ultimate goal of the hero's journey, so there is an end, for me anyway, and the ultimate destination of the hero's journey is to get to a space of total unconditional love for every being. I see that as the the coming home.
Yeah.
So Jenny, we're into the sort of last 9 minutes. Is there anything you want to sort of close with? How do people get hold of you? And I'll put all of your links and details in the show notes. Or any wise words of wisdom. And for me, where I'm coming from, like, because we're all equal, I never give advice. I can't, because that decries the sovereignty of other people. And this little phrase, it got me right out of codependent behavior. Took a while, but I just followed this little phrase: unsolicited advice is abuse. And that would just work magic for me. So I never give advice, but all I can do is, like my clients, they will share an issue they're going through. And all I can say is from my own experience, when I was in this position, when I was experiencing that, this is how I felt and this is what I did. And I think I went off on a tangent there, so sorry.
No, the tangents are where it's at for sure. But yeah, I think that a lot of people who are in the healing world sometimes become obsessed with, I need to release this, I need to stop that. And sometimes it can almost become like a self-abuse. I'm not good enough. I've still got all this shit. I've still got all this stuff. But actually, I think that we need to love the aspects of ourselves that we hate. And it's like what I said before, taking the pearl from the negative experience, like that's what integration is. And a lot of people who heal obsessively, obviously you need to if you've been through all of that stuff. But I think there's two things that you can do that can kind of offset I need to get rid of this stuff. I need to be different to how I am. You need, like you said, you need to accept who you are, and you need to accept how you've become the way that you've become. And that's accepting all of it, the light, the dark, like the dichotomy. Like we're supposed to integrate everything and kind of find the middle way and find alignment with what is. So whenever now, because I mean I have been guilty of like being very obsessive healing, and I've got to be different. I've got to change more. But like when I'm healing now, I consciously bring in the aspects that I'm looking for to replace the negative emotion that I've been working on. So, when you know what you don't want, you know what you do want, and that's how you find yourself, and that's how you become more authentic. So bring in the positive aspects of what you're looking for, because intention setting and visualization is like so powerful. But also I think like we've all got those aspects of ourselves that we hate. Like, you don't like the fact that you've still got addictions and all of that, but like, what are you getting from it? Why is it good in some ways? And like, I need to look back at my life, and say, well, yeah, things are not perfect in my family. We've still got things we haven't sorted, but that's okay. And like, we've
Yeah.
still got time.
Yeah.
We've still got time. We haven't learned how to do that yet, but like life is learning. And I'm quite happy with the way things are because it's better than it was. So
Yeah.
improvement is happening. And, you know, we're not perfect. And we're just like having a game of pretend with ourselves if we say that we are. So, you know, why is it good that all of that stuff happened? Because
Well,
there's loads of good that have come out of it for me.
yeah.
You
Well,
know,
you're talking about taking the pearl out. That's why I call my book, my first book, The Gift of Depression,
yeah,
because it was the
perfect.
pain of depression that gave me the energy to go and find my own, and this is a Bob word, to find my own solutions. And I found them within my heart.
Mm,
So for me, the mind is always looking for answers, but the heart already knows.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. Getting your getting your heart and your mind to talk to each other, that's the tricky one.
Well,
But you know,
I treat my mind like I treat my little puppy dog. Um, and as a spiritual mechanic, it's just another tool in my toolbox. But being a good parent, I know my mind, my intellect needs exercising. So every day I'll take it for a run. I'll say, okay, mind, you go off and do some research into
mm,
sonoluminescence. And it comes back and reports to me, pat it on the head. Thank you, mind. You've done a great job. I'll take you for another run tomorrow. So for me, my mind is just a tool that I use when I choose.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But
It's
again,
perfect.
it's just another example of people sharing their own story and their own insights. And on an energetic level, some of that stuff will resonate with other people. And for me, I do live in a feeling universe, not a thinking universe.
Mm, yeah, I'm definitely a feeler and a knower.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
And
mm,
for me, there is a vast difference between knowledge and knowing.
mm,
Knowledge is headspace, but inner
yeah,
knowing is heart space. Yeah,
yeah, it really it is. And when you're like that, you know, naturally, you were like that when you were a small child, which is why you found it all so painful. You know, that makes sense.
yeah. So I think that's probably enough of this conversation. I'd like to chat with you again off record for a little while if
Mm,
you're up for that after we end
yeah.
this. So I hope to the audience that find this um, little dialogue by following their heart, which will bring them here. Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you, Jenny. It's great connecting with another wounded healer, and it's great being part of the grand awakening, which is exponential. Um, and that's pretty deep. So
Yeah,
I
it's
look,
really exciting, isn't it? It's an
yeah,
exciting time. Like that's one of the pearls that I'm taking. Like I love this journey.
yeah,
Like I don't know what's going to happen every day when I wake up, and that's like what I really wasn't experiencing when I was really struggling. But now it's like everything's amazing.
yeah, it is. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll stop recording now
People.
if I can. How do I stop recording?
Oh,